وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد, we begin our first lesson in Kitab As-Siyam, the book of fasting, from the beneficial work of Imam As-Sa'di rahimahullah ta'ala, Manhaj As-Salikeen, Manhaj As-Salikeen. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to facilitate our affairs and to make it easy for us to benefit and to understand His religion, and to make the knowledge a light for us and a proof for us and not against us. Innahu Jawadun Kareem. So the author, he says, Kitab As-Siyam, the book of As-Siyam. As-Siyam, it means fasting. Sama yasumu sawman wa siyaman, to fast. And in the Arabic language, يعني linguistically or لغة, الصيام هو الإمساك مطلقا. الإمساك مطلقا عن القول أو الفعل. الإمساك, you need to refrain from something. This is what as-siyam means linguistically, to refrain from something and to leave it, and to avoid it and stay away from it. Allah, He ordered Maryam alayhi salam, وَقُولِي إِنِّي نَذَرْتُ لِرَحْمَنِ صَوْمًا فَلَنْ أُكَلِّمَ الْيَوْمَ إِنْسِيًّا فَلَنْ أُكَلِّمَ الْيَوْمَ إِنْسِيًّا, to say to them that indeed I have taken an oath with Ar-Rahman, an oath to make a fast, Sawman. But the intent here is not the legislative meaning, not fasting from the food and the drink and the likes, but rather فَلَنْ أُكَلِّمَ الْيَوْمَ إِنْسِيًّا, a fast, yani meaning refraining from speaking. So I will not speak to a person today. I will not speak to any person today. So we see that this is an example of the linguistic meaning of fasting. The linguistic meaning of fasting, al-imsak, to refrain from something and to stay away from it. To refrain from something and stay away from it, whether it is a statement or an action. Whether it is a statement or an action. And as for the legislative meaning, then it is very similar. Only it's more specific. And it has the same meaning of to refrain and to avoid and to leave something, but it's a specific type of refraining. And this is the case with regards to the legislative meanings of the terms of the religion. The definition of as-siyam shar'an, legislatively, the people of knowledge, they mention at-ta'abbudu lillah. At-ta'abbudu lillahi azza wa jal min shakhsin makhsus bil-imsaki عن المفطرات من طلوع الفجر إلى غروب الشمس بنية. These definitions are important to understand. They're fundamentals and foundations for the issues and the masail that will be studied after this affair. And they'll be based and understood regarding the likes of these definitions. التعبد لله, الصيام شرعا, التعبد لله. It's an action of worship. This is first and foremost. It must be realized and understood that a person, he's fasting for the sake of Allah. يتقرب إلى الله عز وجل بهذا الإمساك. He's drawing near to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, hoping that Allah would accept from him. So while he's refraining with his body parts, likewise he is hoping for the reward from Allah. And likewise he is fearing the punishment of Allah. And likewise his heart is moving with his love and hope and fear while his body is moving. And this is the true imsak, and this is the true fasting. And this is why the fasting is legislated, to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the best of those who are fasting are those who remember Allah the most while they're fasting. The best of those who are fasting, there are those who remember Allah, remembering the greatness of Allah and His majesty and glory, and remembering the favors and the blessings of Allah. And likewise remembering the limits and the legislation and the law of Allah, that which is allowed and that which is permissible, and striving to abide by that, and remembering the meeting of Allah and taking preparation. The one who has the best fast, he's the one who fasts in this manner. He's the one who's fasting in this manner. التعبد لله عز وجل من شخص مخصوص. This fast is an action of worship, so therefore it's only accepted from a specific type of individual. The author, he's going to touch on this affair bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. We speak about that in a bit of detail. The specific person who the fast is obligatory upon, and whom it is accepted from, and whom it is not. التعبد لله عز وجل من شخص مخصوص بالإمساك عن المفطرات, by refraining from everything that invalidates and breaks the fast. Likewise, we will take these affairs in a bit of brief detail, inshallah, likewise. And the mufattirat, the fundamentals of those are three: al-aklu wal-shurbu wal-jima', eating and drinking and having sexual relations. And also there are other affairs that are included as well. Bil-imsaki an al-mufattirat, by refraining from everything that would break and invalidate the fast. So therefore, it's an action of worship. A believer, he's refraining from everything that would break the fast, seeking the pleasure of Allah, hoping for the reward from Allah. If it's an obligatory fast, fearing that if he were to invalidate that fast intentionally, that he would have a punishment and a threat of the anger of Allah. So he's doing it as an action of worship and seeking nearness to Allah. And it's from that specific person by refraining on those things, from those things that break the fast, min tulu' al-fajri, yani al-fajr as-sadiq, from the rising of the true fajr, and at the time whenever the fajr prayer begins. The time whenever it's allowed to pray the fajr prayer, at this time the imsak begins, and the fasting it must start. And it will continue ila tulu'i, ila ghurub al-shams, min tulu' al-fajr ila ghurub al-shams, until the setting of the sun, biniyah. But it also has to have an intention. It has to have an intention. When we spoke about at-ta'abbud, this likewise is a niyyah. This likewise is an intention. But this is called niyyatu al-ma'mulillah. The ta'abbud, the intention to do it sincerely for the sake of Allah and to seek the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is an intention. It's the intention of al-ikhlas. And it's the intention that will identify the one who the person is performing the action for. So the action, since it's an action of worship, it must be performed sincerely and purely for the sake of Allah, as has preceded. As for in the end, we said biniyya to siyam. And you have to have the intention for that specific fast. If it's the fast of Ramadan in the daytime of Ramadan, the intention must identify that. If it's an intention to fast Ramadan, making it up outside the days of Ramadan, then there must be an intention for that. If it's an intention to fast, an obligatory fast for an expiation, it's an obligation to identify that. Or for an oath, like a nadhr, for example, it's an obligation to identify that. Or if it's a non-obligatory fast, but it's for a specific reason, or based upon a specific narration or sunnah, like al-Ithnain al-Khamis, or Yom Arafah, or Yom Ashura, and the likes. These are specific non-obligatory fasts. There must be an intention to identify that. Or if it is just a fast, yani siyam al-mutlaq, then likewise you have the intention to fast this general fast. So there must be the intention to do it for the sake of Allah alone, seeking His pleasure and reward, and likewise the intention to perform that specific action and to identify that. So this is the definition of fasting linguistically and legislatively. Kitabu Siyam. So the author, he says, Al-Aslu Fihi. Kitabu As-Siyam Al-Aslu Fihi. Yani Kitabu Siyam, he's talking directly now, Siyam Shahri Ramadan, fasting the month of Ramadan. Al-Aslu Fihi, yani Al-Aslu Fi Wujubi, Siyami Shahri Ramadan, Qawluhu Ta'ala. The Asl here, the origin, yani Al-Dalil. The word Al-Asl in the Arabic language, it means Ma yubna alayhi ghayruhu, yani the asfalu shay. But in the legislation, it has a number of meanings, a number of different meanings according to the intent of the people of knowledge who are discussing those affairs. But here, what is intended, Al-Aslu Fihi, yani Dalil, the proof and the evidence for the obligation of fasting the month of Ramadan. Qawluhu ta'ala, the statement of Allah the Most High. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kutiba alaykum as-siyam kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. The author, he says, al-ayat. Al-ayat yani akmil al-ayat, or ila akhir al-ayat, yani to the end of the verses, meaning the end of the verses of fasting. And it's well known with all of us, alhamdulillah, the verses of fasting, they're about 2 pages. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He discussed the obligation and the legislation and laws of fasting in approximately 2 pages in Surah Al-Baqarah. So the origin for the obligation of this is the statement of Allah the Most High. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is addressing the believers here specifically. Oh, you who believe, calling them by the name of faith, meaning that this is an indication that those who believe in Allah and believe in the last day, and they believe in Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that faith should carry them to abide by that which is going to be mentioned next. And meaning that Allah is going to mention something very important, that the believers, those who have sincere and true faith, their faith will carry them to abide by that. Kutiba alaykumus siyam. Fasting has been prescribed upon you. يعني made obligatory. فرض عليكم. يعني فرض الله عز وجل عليكم الصيام. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has made the fast an obligation upon you. And this is a great benefit likewise, that we know that it's an obligation. It has come in the famous hadith, Hadith al-Qudsi, that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he mentioned that Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, وَمَا تَقَرَّبَ إِلَيَّ عَبْدِي بِشَيْءٍ أَحَبَّ إِلَيَّ مِمَّا افْتَرَضْتُ عَلَيْهِ. That my slave has never sought to draw near to me with anything more beloved to me than except I had made it. He has not sought nearness to me, or sought tried to draw near to me with anything more beloved to me except that what I have made obligatory upon him. And meaning that the obligatory actions, they're the most beloved actions and deeds to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the one who was hoping to draw near to Allah, let him begin with the obligations by fulfilling them in the manner prescribed. So the fast of Ramadan is from those obligations. Rather, it's from the great pillars of Islam, the fourth pillar of Islam, as we all know. So therefore, it's an obligation, just as it was an obligation upon those before. And the wisdom behind that is to obtain piety. Is to obtain piety in the heart, sincere and true faith, the fear of Allah Azza wa Jal, and to cultivate in the heart the belief that is sincere and strong and firm, that will carry a person to perform the obligations daily in the manner prescribed, and to avoid and stay away from the prohibitions entirely, in public and in private, hoping for the reward from Allah and fearing His punishment. This is the reality of taqwa. So fasting is from the greatest means to cultivate this in the heart of a believer. Fasting is from the greatest means to cultivate and to nourish and to cause the piety to grow and to flourish and to become strong in the heart of a believer. And this is because as-siyamu sirrun bayna al-abdi wa bayna rabbihi. That's because fasting is a secret. It's a secret between a person and between his Lord. And a person, although the people are looking at him and he can appear to them to fast, if he liked, he can always go behind closed doors, or when no one is looking, and take a drink if he's thirsty, or take a bite if he's hungry, or if he sees something sweet, he can taste it, and the likes like this. Meaning he could break his fast easily and no one could see him. But the believer with sincere and true faith, he knows that Allah can see him. And he knows that Allah is well aware of his situation wherever he may be. And that although the eyes of the people cannot see him, the Lord of the people can see him. So therefore he'll refrain. يُمْسِكُ عَنْ ذَلِكَ. He'll refrain out of sincere faith and making muraqabah and remembering that Allah is watching him. And then likewise, at this time, he's not doing it for any other reason. The people cannot benefit him in this affair. They cannot praise him and the likes like this. And it's very hard to show off. It's very hard. A person will have to go to a bit of difficulty to show off in fasting. For example, to directly tell them and the likes like this. So this is something that will cultivate the fear of Allah in the heart of a believer, and it will nourish that faith. So this is from the wisdom of fasting. This is from the wisdom of fasting. After this, the author, he says, وَيَجِبُ الصِّيَامُ رَمَضَانَ عَلَى كُلِّ مُسْلِمٍ بَالِغٍ عَاقِلٍ قَادِرٍ عَلَى الصَّوْمِ برؤية هلاله أو إكمال شعبان 30 يوما. قال صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا رأيتموه فصوموا وإذا رأيتموه فأفطروا فإن غم عليكم فاقدروا له. متفق عليه. وفي لفظ فاقدروا له 30. وفي لفظ فأكملوا عدة شعبان 30. رواه البخاري. The author, he says, rahimahullah ta'ala, وَيَجِبُ صِيَامُ رَمَضَانِ. And the fast of Ramadan is an obligation. The fast of Ramadan is an obligation, clarifying the ruling of this affair. But it's an obligation upon specific individuals. This is going back to the clarification of the definition. The definition of fasting, التعبد لله عز وجل من شخص مخصوص, from a specific type of person. That obligation is upon a specific type of person. And this is the clarification here of that individual. So the people of Nad, as they mentioned, with regards to the obligations, there are shurut, conditions. They're called shurut al-wujub. Shurut al-wujub, the conditions of the obligation of a particular action. Also, there are shurut al-sihha, the conditions for the correctness or the fact that the action will be accepted and it will be considered performed properly and correct according to the legislation. So here the author, he's mentioning shurut wujub al-siyam. Shurut wujub al-siyam, the conditions for the obligation of fasting. And likewise, some of them as well are conditions for the sihha, or the correction of fasting. And the fact that the fast will be considered correct. ويجب صيام رمضان على كل مسلم بالغ عاقل قادر على الصيام. These are the four that he mentioned here. By seeing its moon. It's an obligation to fast the month of Ramadan. The obligation is upon every Muslim. And every Muslim who has reached the age of puberty, and he has a sane mind, and he has the ability to fast. These are four important points with regards to this. The obligation of fasting is upon every Muslim who has reached the age of puberty. Every Muslim who has reached the age of puberty, and he has a sound mind, and he has the ability to fast physically. And that fast will be with the sighting of the moon, or else it will be by completing the month of Sha'ban 30 days. The author, he says that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that if you see it, meaning the moon of Sha'ban, meaning the moon of Ramadan, if you see it, then fast. And if you see it, meaning the moon of Shawwal, then break your fast. فَإِنْ غُمَّ عَلَيْكُمْ, and if the sighting is obscured, إِنْ غُمَّ عَلَيْكُمْ يعني إِنْ حَالَ بَيْنَكُمْ وَبَيْنَ رُؤْيَةِ الْهِلَالِ غَيْمٌ وَقَطَرٌ أو نحوه, if some type of dust or clouds or the likes comes between you and the sighting of the moon, meaning there's something obscuring the view, فَقْدُرُوا لَهُ, then estimate the number of that month. Muttafaqun alayhi. And then the author, he says in one wording, فَقْدُرُوا لَهُ ثَلَاثِينَ, then estimate and count the number of the month, 30 days. And in another wording that even clarifies in greater detail, فَأَكْمِلُوا عِدَّةَ شَعْبَانَ ثَلَاثِينَ, then complete the period of Sha'ban 30 days. It's narrated by Bukhari. Al-Bukhari. So we discuss each one of these affairs here in a bit of brief detail, inshallah ta'ala. So the first condition for the acceptance of the fast and the obligation of the fast is that a person, he will be a Muslim. So شرط وجوب الصيام، الشرط الأول هو الإسلام، هو شرط لوجوب أداء الصيام ولوجوب قضائه ولوجوب صحته. Being a Muslim, al-Islam is a condition for the obligation of performing the fast of Ramadan, and it's an obligation for making up the days of Ramadan, and it's an obligation, and it's a condition for the correctness of the fast, of the fast. So the one who was a disbeliever, the fast is not obligatory upon him, meaning he's not required to do it. He's not required to do it until he accepts Islam. So the people of knowledge, they mentioned that the disbelievers, they will be held accountable for the likes of these affairs. They'll be held accountable for the likes of these affairs in the hereafter. But it will not be accepted from them until they bring its condition. They will not be accepted from them the salat and the fasting and the likes of the other obligations and avoiding the prohibitions. These things will not be accepted from the disbeliever until he brings the condition for its acceptance, and that is at Islam. But he will be held accountable for that in the hereafter. And that which clarifies that, whenever the people in the paradise, they're asking about the people in the hellfire, وَمَا سَلَكَكُمْ فِي سَقَرٍ, and what landed you in the hellfire? قَالُوا لَمْ نَكُ مِنَ الْمُصَلِّينَ. They began with the affair of the salah. We did not used to be from those who prayed. And in the end, وَكُنَّا نُكَذِّبُ بِيَوْمِ الدِّينِ. And this is enough. And we used to disbelieve in the day of judgment. So this is pure disbelief, to disbelieve in the day of judgment. But they mentioned the fact that they did not pray. They're in the hellfire because they did not pray. So it's an indication that along with their disbelief for denying the day of judgment, they're also punished and taken into account for leaving the prayer. So the disbeliever, he يعني مطالب بالصيام بالصلاة والصيام وفروع الشريعة بشرطها وهو الإسلام. Just like a believer, likewise, he is required to pray, but the prayer will not be accepted from him except with tahara. The believer, he's required to pray, but his prayer will not be accepted from him except with tahara. And if he did not have tahara, he will not be ordered to pray until he made tahara. So likewise, the disbelievers, they're going to be held accountable for these affairs, and they're required to perform them after they accept Islam. So long as they have not accepted Islam, they will not perform them. So it's not allowed to invite the disbelievers to fast with us. It's just nonsense, and it is not allowed, and it's not from the way of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Whenever the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he sent Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiyallahu anhu to Yemen, he said to him, إنك تأتي قوما من أهل الكتاب فليكن أول ما تدعوهم إليه أن يوحدوا الله. Or in some wordings, likewise, شهادة أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمدا رسول الله. فإنهم أطاؤوك لذلك. And then if they obey you in that, meaning if they don't obey you in that, then they will not be Muslims and they will not be required to do anything after that. But if they obey you in that, then you inform them about the prayer. And then if they obey you in that, then you inform them about the zakat, so on and so forth. So the point is that with regards to calling the disbelievers, we begin with the shahadatain, and we call them to establish the correct belief and the correct creed, and to believe in Allah, and that there's nothing worthy of worship except for Him, and to believe in Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that he's the messenger of Allah. And after that, we will invite them to the prayer and invite them to the fasting and the rest of the beautiful and good deeds of Al-Islam. The beautiful and good deeds of Al-Islam. So likewise, if the disbeliever, he accepted Islam, if he accepted Islam, he will not be required to make up the days that had preceded from his life. Or if he accepted Islam in the middle of Ramadan, he will not be required to make up any of those days. He will not be required to make up any of those days, because al-Islam shartun li wujubi ada as-siyam wa qada'ihi. And likewise, even if he were to fast, it will not be accepted, because al-Islam likewise is shartun li sihhati as-salam, shartun li sihhati as-siyam. It's a condition as well for the correctness of the fast. Allah, He says in His book, وَمَا مَنَعَهُمْ أَن تُقْبَلَ مِنْهُمْ نَفَقَاتُهُمْ إِلَّا أَنَّهُمْ كَفَرُوا بِاللَّهِ وَبِرَسُولِهِ. And nothing prohibited them, meaning the disbelievers, nothing prohibited them from their charities being accepted from them, except for the fact that they disbelieved in Allah and in His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So disbelief is a reason for all actions to be rejected and nothing to be accepted. And likewise, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentioned about the parable of those who disbelieve. مَثَلُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا بِرَبِّهِمْ أَعْمَالُهُمْ كَرَمَادٍ اشْتَدَّتْ بِهِ الرِّيحُ فِي يَوْمٍ عَاصِفٍ لَا يَقْدِرُونَ مِمَّا كَسَبُوا عَلَى الشَّيْءِ ذَلِكَ هُوَ الضَّلَالُ الْبَعِيدُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentioned that the parable of those who disbelieve. مَثَلُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا بِرَبِّهِمْ. The example of those who disbelieve in their Lord, their deeds are like ashes. Their deeds are like ashes scattered in a furious wind on a stormy day. On a stormy day. The person, he had ashes and he threw them in the air now, he would not be able to gather them. They'll get away from him. The ashes now, and if the fans were on, it would be even more severe. So to imagine the example that Allah is drawing with regards to the deeds of the disbelievers. If they're they're like ashes cast in the air, scattered about by a furious wind on a stormy day. They will not benefit from them whatsoever. They will not benefit from them whatsoever. They will have no benefit from them whatsoever. So this is something that we should take heed with regards to. And we should not be deceived. We should not be deceived by what we see in this life from the prosperity and the likes and the good wealth that the disbelievers have. Those who die upon disbelief, then they will never have good in their life. They'll never have happiness or joy in their life again. Those who die upon disbelief, وَلِيَذُ بِاللَّهِ, they are the true losers. لَا يَسْتَوِي أَصْحَابُ النَّارِ وَأَصْحَابُ الْجَنَّةِ أَصْحَابُ الْجَنَّةِ هُمُ الْفَائِزُونَ. So the first condition for fasting, the obligation of fasting, performing it and making it up, and likewise for its correctness, is al-Islam. After that, the author, he mentioned baligh, and yakuna balighan, and yakuna balighan, and yakuna musliman balighan. This is the condition of al-bulugh, and this means he must reach the age of puberty. He must reach the age of puberty. So the people of knowledge, they mention about al-bulugh, huwa shartun li wujubi as-siyam, wa shartun لقضائه وليس شرطا لصحته وليس شرطا لصحته. That al-bulugh is a condition for the obligation of fasting, to perform it and likewise to make it up. But it's not a condition for the correctness of fasting. Meaning that the one, as-sabi al-mumayyiz, in sama, قُبِلَ مِنْهُ صِيَامُهُ وَيُثَابُ عَلَيْهِ وَيُثَابُ وَلِيُّهُ بِالْحَثِّ عَلَيْهِ. So the one who has not reached the age of puberty, yani puberty, al-bulugh, puberty is a condition for the obligation of fasting. Meaning the one who has not reached the age of puberty, it's not an obligation for him to fast. It's not an obligation for him to fast. And if he were to reach puberty, it's also not an obligation for him to make up that which has preceded. It's not an obligation for him to make up that which has preceded. So if a young boy, for example, who was near the age of puberty, he reached bulugh, yani he reached puberty in the daytime of Ramadan, it would not be incumbent for him to make up the days that had preceded, because al-bulugh is a shart, condition for the obligation of fasting, performing it and making it up, performing it and making it up. But it's not a condition for the correctness of fasting. So if a young boy or a young girl who was considered mumayyiz, then if he were to fast, then his fast would be correct. His fast would be good and be accepted, and he will have a reward for that. And likewise, his guardian or parent also will have a reward for that as well, for encouraging him to fast, for encouraging him to fast, for encouraging him to fast. So it has been mentioned that the companions, radiallahu anhum, كانوا يسومون سبيانهم. كانوا يسومون سبيانهم. That they used to make their children fast, and they would encourage them to fast. So this is the case here. And some of the one the sabi al-mumayyiz, he's the one who the fast is accepted from him. The sabi al-mumayyiz, he's the one who is approximately at the age of 7 years old, meaning he's a young child who has not yet reached the age of puberty, but he's able to distinguish between good and bad and right and wrong, and he's able to comprehend and understand, and he knows what he's doing. He has an intention. He's able to intend to fast. As for the child who is under the age of tamyiz, and under the age of 7 and 6, 5, 4, and the likes like this, it's not actually any specifically at the age of 7, but approximately. And that which differentiates is the maturity. So he hasn't reached puberty, but he's mature enough to know what he's doing and to make the intention. This one is called the mumayyiz. As for the one that is doing a tamyiz, he's not mumayyiz. He's lesser than that. He will not be encouraged to fast. He will not be encouraged to fast. And likewise, this is very important, especially with us in these lands, because this is from a tarbiyah al-Islamiyya as-sahiha, to cultivate and to raise the children upon performing the obligations of Al-Islam. To cultivate and to raise the children upon performing the obligations of Al-Islam. And the Prophet ﷺ, he has indicated the likes of these affairs. And the well-known narration, which is authentic on the Prophet ﷺ, Muru abna'akum bis-salat li-sab'i sinin. Order your children to pray at the age of 7, and at the age of tamyiz. At the age of tamyiz, order your children to pray at the age of 7. وَضْرِبُوهُمْ عَلَيْهَا بِعَشْرِ سِنِينَ. And to spank them, you need to discipline them about the prayer at the age of 10. At the age of 10, even before they have reached the age of puberty. At this time, they're not held accountable. If they pray or if they do not pray, if they fast or they do not fast, they will not be held accountable. There's no sin upon them. But this is cultivation in order for it to be facilitated for the child, that by the time he reaches the age of puberty, it will be easy for him. It will be facilitated for him. To stand in the prayer will not be something strange. Rather, something that he's been doing either all the time or from time to time, off and on, here and there. At very minimum, he's hearing the parent all throughout his life, from the time of 7 to the age of 10. Salli. The prayer is good. Allah yuhibbul musallin. As-salat ta'ala salli mai. Come pray with me. Allah, He loves those who pray. Those who pray, they'll enter paradise. Bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Encourage him like this. So this is the encouragement with regards to the salat. It's an order of encouragement. And if he prays, alhamdulillah. And if he doesn't pray, he's not forced. He's not forced, not at this age, not until he reaches 10. Likewise, the people of knowledge, they mentioned that they made the qiyas here, yani the analogy or the comparison with regards to fasting. Because just as a salah is a pillar from the pillars of Al-Islam and from the greatest obligations of Al-Islam, likewise fasting is a pillar from the pillars of Al-Islam and from the greatest obligations of Al-Islam. And the companions, radiallahu anhum, they used to encourage their children to fast. So therefore, it's in the same manner here. Whenever they're at the age of 7, at the age of tamyiz, the children, they will be encouraged to fast. The children, they will be encouraged to fast. But the encouragement here, just like with the prayer, it's an order. A person, he will order them and he will tell them to pray. But it's not an order of obligation. He will not order them and force them to pray. ليس أمر إلزام أو إيجاب وليس أمر شدة وقوة. Likewise, it's not. He will not order them with harshness. He will not order them and make them do it and coerce them to do it and force them to do it. If they do not do it, he will not become upset and angry with them, or he will not call them names, or he will not belittle them and the likes like this. This is not the kind of order what is intended here. Muru abna'akum bis-salati li sab'i sinin. What is intended here is to encourage them, to order them يعني أمر تحبيب وترغيب تراغبهم في الصلاة تحبب الصلاة إليهم. You encourage them to pray. Likewise, the fasting, you encourage them to fast. You clarify to them that the fast is something beloved to Allah, that the one who fasts, he has a great reward with Allah, that there's a gate in paradise called Ar-Rayyan, that only those who fast will enter through it. And if you fast, maybe you'll be from them bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So therefore, you make it beautiful to them. You make it something nice to them. You make it something desirable to them. You clarify to them the virtue of that affair. And then if they fast, alhamdulillah, and if they do not fast, it's no blame on them. It's no blame on them, nor on you. You just encourage them. You cultivate them. You cultivate them. Maybe some of them, they're able to fast the whole day. Others, maybe they can only fast in the morning. So if one of them is trying to fast and it becomes difficult for him, you will not force him. You will try to encourage him to keep going. And if you find that it's becoming difficult, you let him break his fast. You let him break his fast. You don't punish him or torture him with fasting, because this is only going to cause him to not like the fast. It's going to be heavy for him at this age when his mind is not completely mature. He will not be able to carry it and to bear it, and therefore he will start to dislike this affair. Likewise, with regards to the salah, it's the same order, the order of encouragement. The order of encouragement. So this is from the beautiful tarbiyah. The beautiful tarbiyah. And although it's not an obligation for the child to fast at this age, or for the child to pray at this age, it's incumbent for the parent to order the child and to cultivate the child. And the parent, he'll be held accountable for this affair, that he must tell the child to pray. He must tell him, go pray. And likewise, he must encourage him to fast. This is part of the obligation of having a child, of cultivating the child upon the manners and etiquettes and the obligations of Islam. Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, qu anfusakum wa ahlikum nara. Oh, you who believe, save yourself and your family from a fire. From a fire. So in order to do that, a person, he has to be upon the upright path, the way of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he has to encourage and aid and discipline his children likewise to be upon that same way. To be upon that same way. For this reason, it has been narrated from Ali and from Ibn Abbas and radiallahu anhum that they mentioned to save your family from the fire whose fuel is many stones. يعني علموهم الفرائض وأدبوهم. علموهم الفرائض وأدبوهم. To teach them the obligations and to discipline them. To teach them the obligations and to discipline them, and to take them likewise away from that which is haram and impermissible. So this is the case here. The sabi who was not mumayyiz, he's not ordered with salah, nor is he ordered with fasting. Nor is he ordered with fasting. The sabi who is mumayyiz, he's mumayyiz, he's ordered with salah. He's ordered with salah. What kind of order? Tahbib, of encouragement. Of encouragement. We encourage him to pray. We don't force him to pray. If he prays, alhamdulillah. If he doesn't pray, you let him play. You let him run. But you tell him. You encourage him like this. But with regards to fasting, as-sabi al-mumayyiz, there's two conditions. Al-mutiq wa ghayr al-mutiq. Fasting. He's mumayyiz, he understands, he knows what he's doing. He's not at the age of puberty yet, but he's close. But some of the children, they have the ability to fast physically. And others, they're weaker. They don't have the ability to fast. And maybe not physically, or also maybe not mentally. Sometimes the obligations on a child, if you ask them to do one small thing, it's the heaviest thing on their heart. It'll be the heaviest thing on their heart, something very small. To take them away from their time and what they're involved in, sometimes this is very hard on their small hearts and their minds. So we have to keep this in mind and consider this affair. So the child who is mumayyiz and he's not able to fast, he will not be encouraged to fast. If you know that from the child, we'll not raise them upon weakness and being a coward and the likes like this. If you know that it would harm the child, that he's not able to do it, then you leave him until he's able to. You leave him until he's able to, and then you will encourage him. As for the child who's able to, some of the children, maybe they're 7 years old, 8 years old, they fast the whole Ramadan. Or maybe they fast half the Ramadan. Or maybe sometimes they fast in the morning time until the evening time. Or maybe you can encourage them to leave off the food at another time throughout the day. Just encouraging them and helping them and cultivating that ability in them to leave the food and the drink. But likewise, we have to encourage them as well and remind them that they're doing this for the sake of Allah. So we have to remind ourselves as well, it's ibadah. And then whenever we encourage them based upon faith, based upon belief. Do this for the sake of Allah. If you fast for the sake of Allah, Allah will reward you. Allah will make life easy for you. Allah will guide you. Allah will bless you. Maybe Allah will guide your father to buy you a good gift. Maybe Allah will provide you with money you didn't know where it would come from, and the likes like this. So you encourage them, but you don't attach their heart to the worldly life. You attach their heart to Allah Azza wa Jal, and to performing it for the sake of Allah. In any case, this is the second condition. Al-Islamu wal-bulugh. Al-Islamu wal-bulugh. So the one who is multi, he's the one who is encouraged. Now, the people of knowledge, they mentioned the signs of bulugh. The signs of bulugh, to summarize, they are 3 for the male and add additional one, only 3 for the male and female, and add an additional one for the male. So there are signs that indicate that the child has reached the age of purity. And with bulugh and the aql, now the child, he becomes mukallafan. He becomes mukallafan, meaning he's held accountable for his actions. So the child before reaching bulugh, before reaching the age of puberty, he's not held accountable for his actions. But after he reaches the age of puberty, now he becomes held accountable for his actions, meaning that what he says and he does is going to be written, and he's going to be taken into account with Allah Azza wa Jal with regards to this. So this is something for the guardians and the parents to keep in mind likewise, that the child first is an amana and a blessing and a favor from Allah, and that child is a slave of Allah and is going to return to Allah and be asked just like we are. Just like we are. So if we truly want good for ourselves and our families, then we must cultivate ourselves and our family upon the proper creed and belief, and upon the proper methodology and way of life, upon the deen of Al-Islam, the Islam that was revealed to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Islam that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he taught his companions radiyallahu anhum, the Islam that they were upon whenever Allah Azza wa Jal, he revealed the verse, al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum wa atmamtu alaykum ni'mati wa raditu lakum al-islam deena. This was revealed in the last days of the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Today I have completed your religion for you, and I perfected my favor upon you, and I'm pleased with that Islam as your religion and way of life. So the religion that was on the deen that was that day, and the actions of worship that was upon that day, this is the one that is pleasing to Allah. وَرَضِيتُ لَكُمُ الْإِسْلَامَ دِينًا. Yani that deen that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he completed it was completed by his conveyance, and that which he taught to his companions radiallahu anhum, and that which they carried on to the ummah. For this reason, Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, مَا لَمْ يَكُنْ يَوْمَ إِذٍ دِينًا فَلَنْ يَكُنَ الْيَوْمَ دِينًا. And whatever was not considered deen on that day, it will never be considered deen today. It will never be considered deen today. This is something to truly ponder over. Whatever was not considered from the way of Al-Islam on that day, it will not be considered Al-Islam today, no matter who decorates it or who says this or says that, but rather that which is clarified in the likes of this verse. This is the religion, that which is pleasing to Allah. So therefore, it's incumbent for us to raise ourselves upon that way in order for us to have the pleasure of Allah, and likewise our families. So the child, when he reaches puberty, there are signs. There are signs. The first sign, imbat al-sha'r al-khashin. Imbat al-sha'r al-khashin. The pubic hair, yani hawl al-qubul. Hawla al-qubul. The pubic hair, that is the hair that is coarse and rough and thick, will begin to grow in the private area. In the private area, the people of knowledge, they mentioned that the hair in this private area is 2 types. One of them is na'im, and the other one is khashin. So the one that is na'im, this one is not considered. Maybe there's some hairs that's any saqit, it's laying down, it's flat, and it's soft, and the likes like this. This is not a sign of puberty. The one that's the sign of puberty is the thick, coarse hair that sticks up, the one that's well known. In any case, if this is found, if this is present, this is a sign that that child has reached the age of puberty, regardless of the age. 7 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old, whatever the case may be. If this is found, this is a legislative sign. Alama shar'iyya ala al-bulugh. Alamatun shar'iyyatun ala al-bulugh. This is a legislative sign upon the child reaching the age of puberty. And likewise, the second sign is al-ihtilam. Al-ihtilam is to have the wet dream. Al-ihtilam is to have the wet dream. So if the child had a wet dream, even if they did not have the pubic hair, even if they did not have the pubic hair, it's not incumbent for all of these signs to be in one child, but rather it's incumbent for one of these signs to be found. If one of these signs are found, then the child has reached the age of puberty. So even if the pubic hair was not present, but they had the wet dream, then this is a sign that that child has reached the age of puberty. Likewise, the third sign, alama, is reaching the age of 15 years old. Reaching the age of 15 years old. So if the child, for example, he did not have the pubic hair, and he never had a wet dream, and then he reached the age of 15, then he has reached the age of puberty now, regardless of whether the previous signs are present or not. So even if the child, for example, is 7, 8, and the children, they differ. The children, they differ. And the girls, many times they reach the age of puberty before the boys. But they're different. Sometimes they will reach the age of puberty at 7, sometimes at 9, sometimes at 10, sometimes at 15, and the likes like this. Every child is a bit different. So this is something to be aware of, to know that affair, because now the obligations are upon them and they will be held accountable. As for the fourth affair, it is al-hayd. Al-hayd, yani that and this is specific for the female, that she will get her menses. So if the woman, if the young girl, she got her menses, for example, at the age of 9, then she has now become baligha. Now she has reached the age of puberty, and now it's an obligation for her to pray 5 times a day. It's an obligation for her to fast the month of Ramadan. It's an obligation for her to cover properly when she leaves her home and she's around strange men and the likes like this. And these are signs indicating that they have reached the age of puberty, and that the accountability is upon them. So somebody shouldn't say, for example, oh, this is my baby girl, or this is my baby boy. And every little girl is always going to be her father's baby girl, and every little boy is going to be the father's baby boy. But if they reach the age of puberty now, the angels, they write their actions. So if we truly love our baby boys and baby girls, we'll be concerned about this affair and cultivating them upon the obligations of Islam. From that, the salat specifically, and likewise the siyam, as we see here, and before they reach the age of puberty. So that way, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, whenever they reach the age of puberty, it will not be hard or difficult for them to perform these obligations and to abide by them. The third condition the author he mentioned, he said, and yakuna aqilan, that he has al-aql. Al-aql yani the intelligence. So the people of knowledge, they mentioned that al-aql shart liwujubi as-siyam, yani ada'an wa qada'an wa shartun as-sihha. That the intelligence is the condition for the obligation of performing the fast, and an obligation for making up the fast, and an obligation for the correctness of the fast. So the one who is considered insane, and he is considered crazy, he does not have his sanity, it's not an obligation for him to fast. It's not an obligation for him to fast. If Allah favored him and cured him and he recovered from his insanity, it's not an obligation for him to make up the days that he missed while he was in a state of insanity. And if he were to fast while he's in a state of insanity, it will not be accepted from him. Because he does not have the ability to make an intention. From the evidences that indicate this affair with regards to the obligation or the condition of bulugh, and likewise al-aql, is a narration that has been collected authentically from Aisha radiallahu anha, likewise from Ali radiallahu anhu, and other than them from the companions. It's a well-known narration. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, Rufi'a al-qalamu an thalath. The pen has been lifted from 3. Rufi'a al-qalamu an thalath. And thalath, yani thalatha ashkhas, that the pen has been lifted from 3 types of people. The pen of what? Qalamu at-taklif. The pen of accountability. The pen of accountability has been lifted from 3 individuals, any 3 types of individuals. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "An an-na'imi hatta yastayqir," on the person who is sleeping until he wakes up. وَعَنِ الصَّبِيِّ حَتَّى يَكْبُرُ. And from the child until he until he reaches the age of puberty. حَتَّى يَبْلُغ. In some wordings, حَتَّى يَحْتَلِمْ, until he has the wet dream, meaning until he reaches the age of puberty. وَعَنِ الْمَجْنُونَ حَتَّى يُفِيقُ. And on the one who is considered insane until he reaches until he recovers his sanity. So the pen is lifted from them, meaning the pen of accountability. It's not an obligation for them, and likewise, it will not be accepted from them. كيف الأذان نستمر؟ طيب متى نقف؟ طيب جزاك الله خيرا. With regards to the condition of al-aql, so far we had how many conditions? 3. What are they? We'll discuss 3 of them in a bit of detail. The first one is al-Islam. The second one is al-bulugh. And the third one is al-aql. Al-aql is the intelligence, and the sanity. He has his sanity. He knows what he's doing. He has sanity. The opposite of that is al-junun, waliyadu billah, the person who loses sanity. So the aql, this is a great favor and blessing from Allah. To have sanity and to have one's right mind is a great favor and blessing from Allah, and to have guidance for that aql is even greater and even greater from the favors and bounties and blessings of Allah Azza wa Jal. With regards to the aql, there are different issues that we discuss now, and sometimes that could come across. Maybe we may experience some people who are involved in the likes of these affairs. So to know the ruling is beneficial. The people of knowledge, they mentioned Sawmu Sakran. Sawmu Sakran, the one who is intoxicated. The fasting of the person who is intoxicated. So the one who is intoxicated, قَدْ ذَهَبَ أَكْلُهُ. ذَهَبَ أَكْلُهُ, the one who has become intoxicated, for example, from alcohol and the likes like this, or from drugs, from intoxicating drugs, his mind is gone. His mind is gone. And some of the poets, Ibn Wardi, he would mention, كَيْفَ يَسْعَى فِي الْجُنُونِ مَنْ أَقَلْ. How could somebody who has his same right mind hasten to cause himself to become crazy? And in the person who drinks alcohol, and he's been blessed with the gift of sanity, and he is hastening and working with his own hands to remove his sanity and to cause himself to lose his mind. وَلِيَذُ بِاللَّهِ وَلِيَذُ بِاللَّهِ. So the one who is drunk, or the one who is intoxicated, he does not have his aql. He does not have his aql. So what's the ruling for his fast? What's the ruling for his fast? This is the issue that we discussed now. The people of knowledge, they mention that the person here, the one who is intoxicated, if in the end of the night, for example, he made the intention to fast and then he got drunk or became intoxicated, and then استمر معه سكره إلى الليل, and his intoxication continued with him, and he before in the nighttime he intended to fast, and then he got drunk, or then he became intoxicated, and then he's intoxicated for the rest of the day, and then he's intoxicated for the rest of the day until the setting of the sun. The Jumhur ulama, the majority of the scholars, they mentioned that his fast is not correct and not accepted, because the entire day of fasting and the entire period where the ibadah is established, he had lost his aql, and the aql is a condition, and the aql is a condition. So it would be an obligation for him to make up that day. It would be an obligation for him to make up that day. As for if he were to intend to fast in the nighttime, and then after that become intoxicated, and then he would continue to be intoxicated for a portion of the day, and then he would sober up. Maybe, for example, he sobers up before dhuhr or after dhuhr, and then the rest of the day he's sober, meaning his mind came back to him, sobriety came back to him. The people of knowledge, they mention about the fast of this person, the majority of the scholars consider to be correct. The majority of the scholars consider it to be correct because he had the intention, and likewise he had made the imsak intentionally in a portion of the day. That's along with the sin, the great sin of alcohol. And this is a major crime. وَلِيَذُ بِاللَّهِ, intoxicating the mind and becoming drunk or becoming intoxicated, using narcotics and drugs. This is a major sin. وَلِيَذُ بِاللَّهِ. And not to mention in the day of Ramadan. This is even more severe. But the point now is to understand the ruling with regards to fasting. Is his fast correct or not? Is his fast correct or not? And if he had been sober a portion of the day, then inshallah, his fast will be considered correct. And this is the opinion of the majority of the scholars. Likewise, in the issue of the aql, or the intelligence, or the mind, the sanity, is the issue of the sawm al-mughma alayhi. Al-mughma alayhi, the person who has gone unconscious. The fasting of the one who has gone unconscious. And the issue, or the way that we picture this particular masala is similar. Yani if he had intended before morning time, and then he went unconscious, and remained unconscious for the rest of the day. He intended before Fajr, for example, by 30 minutes, and then وَلِيَذُ بِاللَّهِ أُغْمِيَ عَلَيْهِ قُبَيْلَ الْفَجْرِ, before the adhan, he went unconscious, and he continued to be unconscious until after Maghrib. What is the ruling of his fast? From what we learned so far, his fast is not correct. His fast is not accepted. Why? Because he lost his sanity the entire day, from the beginning to the end. If we return back to the definition of fasting, derived from the definition of fasting are the pillars of fasting, and that is al-imsak min tulu' al-fajr إلى غروب الشمس بنية. بنية. These are the two great pillars and obligations of fasting. If these are present, from the right person, then the fast is present. The legislative fast is present. So this person, he had the intention, but he didn't have the imsak. من طلوع الفجر يعني إلى غروب الشمس يعني like this. And he didn't do it for the sake of Allah. And it has come in the hadith of Abi Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, which is likewise hadith Qudsi. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentioned that Allah, he says about the fast, praising the fast and the reward of the fast, يدعو طعامه وشرابه وشهوته من أجلي, for me. He leaves his food, he leaves his drink, he leaves his desires min ajli, for my sake. So the one who went unconscious, whether because of a sickness or because of the alcohol or the intoxicant and the likes like that, from the period of the whole day, he did not leave his food and drink and desires for the sake of Allah. He doesn't have the ability now to have an intention بِذَهَابِ أَقْلِهِ. We understand this point. As for if the person أغمي عليه والعياذ بالله, he lost his consciousness, and he had made the intention, نوى قبل الفجر ثم أغمي عليه, and then he went unconscious, ثم أفاق في النهار, أفاق جزءا من النهار, عند الجمهور يصح صومه, يعني صومه يكون صحيحا. The majority of the scholars, they mention that in this case, that person's fast would be considered correct. The one who made the intention, and then after that he lost consciousness before Fajr, and then sometime in the daytime he recovered and gained his consciousness back, then and continued to fast, of course, then his fast would be considered correct, and Allah knows best. Then his fast would be considered correct, and Allah knows best. Also, we have the issue with regards to the aql, the last topic now, the na'im. The na'im. So we took the sakran and the mughma alayhi and the na'im. The na'im, the person who is sleeping. The person who is sleeping. So if a person, he intended to fast before Fajr, and then he went to sleep before Fajr, and he slept all the way till Maghrib, and he had to nafrad al-masala, just so that we can imagine the issue and the ruling, and it's possible, maybe it could happen. So the issue is not about the fact that he missed the prayer, whether he did that intentionally or not. All of this is going to be something major. For example, if he told the people, don't wake me up, I'm going to sleep, don't wake me up, not for Fajr, not for Dhuhr, not for Asr, like this, then no doubt he would bear the sin of that. He would bear the sin of that. And he intentionally did not wake up. He did not take the means, what he knows. But just to see the ruling, if a person, he fell asleep after making the intention to fast, and he slept all day, and he fell asleep before Fajr, all the way until after Maghrib, is his fast correct or not? It is. Ahsant. ما الفرق? What's the difference? He wants to fast, but what's the difference? What about the one who went unconscious? He wants to fast too. Is there a difference between a sleeping person and an unconscious person? Unconscious person and what about the sleeping person? Does he have a mind? If you touch him, will he wake up? If you call him and move him, will he wake up? So النوم يذهب الإحساس. الإحساس. It takes the الإحساس. It takes your senses away. It doesn't take your mind away. Sleep. When a person goes to sleep, his senses go away, and briefly, but not his mind. His mind is still there. If you touch him, he'll wake up. Or if you move him or call him and the likes like this, or make effort to wake him up, he'll wake up. So this person, his fast would be correct. As for the issue of missing the prayers, that's another topic in discussion. But just to understand the fast, it would be correct. Likewise, for example, the person who works at nighttime. And then he takes suhoor, and he just, in addition, to make it clear, because some of the brothers, they work at nighttime, and it's hard for them. It's hard for them to stay awake the whole day. Maybe they'll sleep a large portion of the day. So if they were to do that, if it's because of negligence, because he's lazy and the likes like this, then no doubt he would his reward will be depleted and accordingly, and he is not going to have the great reward of fasting and striving with those who are fasting and making the effort and going through the pains of fasting and the difficulties of fasting and the likes like this. He slept, and the majority of the day somebody slept after Fajr to Dhuhr, and then he went back to sleep after Dhuhr to Asr, then he went back to sleep after Asr to Maghrib, for example, like this. His fast is correct. His fast is correct if he had the intention. But the reward is not going to be the same as the one who is experiencing the difficulties and and fasting while he's awake for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. For the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. And Allah knows best. After this, the author, he mentioned al-qudra. قادر على الصوم. And عكس القدرة al-ajiz, disability. So qudra means to have the ability, to physically have the ability. The opposite of that is to have disability. The people of knowledge, they mentioned al-ajiz is two types, نوعان. عجز دائم وعجز يعني مؤقت. So the type of ajiz or disability that will continue. A person, he will never be able to fast. He has a particular disease or sickness or old age, which along with this affair will never allow him, will never have the ability to fast. And then there's another type of disability while fasting, and that is the type that is a disability that comes and goes. It's going to go away. For example, he's sick now, but it's hoped that his disease will go away and he'll be strong and able to fast any other days, any throughout the year. So this is the case here, and we will discuss these issues, inshallah. The author, he will mention these specific issues in detail. So the ajiz here, or the qudra, this is meaning the person, he has to be free from sickness and free from old age. Free from sickness and free from old age. There are details there. And we add two more conditions briefly and close, inshallah. So we have four so far: al-Islam, wal-bulugh, wal-aql, wal-qudra. Wal-qudra al-siyam. The fifth one we add al-iqama. Al-iqama. Also from the obligations, the conditions for the obligation of fasting as a person is a resident. As a person, he's a resident. The details of these will come, inshallah. And the one who's traveling, it's not an obligation. So this is considered shart al-sihha. لا شرط عفوا شرط الوجوب لا شرط الصحة. الإقامة شرط الوجوب لا شرط الصحة. Meaning if the musafir, he were to fast, it would be accepted from him, inshallah. But it's a condition for the obligation. Meaning it's not obligatory for the one who's traveling to fast. And the sixth and last condition, الخلوء من الموانع. الخلوء من الموانع. Then a person will be free from anything that will prohibit the fast. And this is in reference to al-haid wal-nufasa. Because the blood of the hayd and the blood of the nifas prohibits the obligation of fasting and also the correctness of fasting. So the woman who has the blood of menses present, then it's not allowed to fast, nor is the fast correct. And likewise, the blood of postnatal bleeding, and some details will come with regards to that. And we close the class with that. هذا وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.